Alright, welcome to the Strange North channel. In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of the gang situation in the province of Saskatchewan, Canada. And typically, Saskatchewan has higher overall crime rates than other provinces and territories in the country. And of course, not all of this is due to gang activity, but a lot of it is, and I find that people are just generally interested in the gang activity in Canada. And so this is an overview of the gang situation in the province of Saskatchewan. And just like I did in my Gangs in Edmonton video, I'm going to start with the Hells Angels. You're probably well aware of the Hells Angels. They started in California many years ago, and they're now an international criminal motorcycle group. And when you're talking about gangs in Canada, the Hells Angels are definitely the most dominant group. They have chapters across the country, including in Saskatoon and Regina. The Hells Angels are generally considered to be an upper level gang, and they often partner with smaller street level gangs who take care of their dirty business and do their drug dealing for them. You also have the Rock Machine Motorcycle Club. This is another criminal motorcycle group that is closely allied with the Hells Angels. And you also hear a lot more about the Heretics Motorcycle Club based in Estevan, Saskatchewan. This group fairly recently expanded into the city of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and they are known to be another support club of the Hells Angels. And then you also have the Outlaws Motorcycle Club. Now, this group was founded in the state of Illinois in 1935, and they're now an international group. But the Outlaws are very strong rivals to the Hells Angels. The Hells Angels have many smaller motorcycle groups that are sort of allies and puppets of the Hells Angels. But the Outlaws never allied with the Hells Angels like a lot of these other smaller groups, and they remain a very strong rival to the HA. And you're not going to hear a ton about the Outlaws Motorcycle Club in Saskatchewan, but they are known to have an established presence in Saskatchewan, particularly in the Saskatoon area. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the Aboriginal gangs in Saskatchewan, because as you're well aware, the Canadian Prairies has a very strong Aboriginal gang presence. And I'm going to start with the Native Syndicate. This is one of the most dominant street gangs in Saskatchewan. I talked about them a little bit in my Gangs of Edmonton video, and this gang is mainly active in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, but they have a really strong influence in Regina in particular, especially Regina's north central neighborhood, which is really known as the Hood of Regina. The Native Syndicate has black and white as their gang colors, and in particular they can be identified by their white bandanas. They are involved in everything from drug trafficking and prostitution to extortion and car theft. The Native Syndicate uses a Mafia style structure, unlike a lot of the other Aboriginal gangs. And like I said, the Native Syndicate is really based in the city of Regina, but you'll find them active across the province. And then over time, as the Native Syndicate grew in prominence, there was another separate gang that was established called the Native Syndicate Killers. They engage in all the same activity as the Native Syndicate, but they are bitter rivals of this original group. Okay, next up is the Indianposi. You've probably heard of them, and I mentioned them in my Gangs of Edmonton video. They are based in Winnipeg, but they've spread across Canada, and they're probably the largest overall Aboriginal gang in Canada. The Indianposi use red as their gang color, and this group was started by Danny and Richard Wolf, two brothers who started this gang in 1988 in Winnipeg's notorious North Side. And they are involved in all the traditional criminal enterprises you might expect out of a gang. And the Indianposi expanded into Saskatchewan in the mid-90s, and they have been a prominent criminal force in that province ever since. And unlike most of the other Aboriginal street gangs in Canada, the Indianposi are considered one of the Hells Angels' major rivals in Western Canada. They have not really built up a cooperative relationship with Hells Angels like other Aboriginal street gangs. In fact, in September of 2002, the Indianposi tried to assassinate the head of the Hells Angels named Mom Boucher while he was in prison by firing a bazooka at his cell. And the founding brothers of the Indianposi, Danny and Richard Wolf, each passed away in Saskatchewan prisons. Danny Wolf was stabbed to death in a Saskatchewan penitentiary in 2010, and his older brother Richard had a heart attack while he was incarcerated in Saskatchewan in 2016. You also have the Saskatchewan Warriors. They are affiliated with the Manitoba Warriors, and they are an offshoot of that original group. The Saskatchewan Warriors aren't as prominent as other groups like the Indianposi or the Native Syndicate, and they are much stronger in Regina than they are in Saskatoon. The Saskatchewan Warriors were a lot more prominent in the mid-2000s, and they have been steadily declining ever since. And then there's the Indian Mafia. This is a relatively new gang, and it emerged in 2014 in Regina. In fact, from 2014 till about 2019, the Indian Mafia as well as the Native Syndicate Killers really really dominated the drug trade in Regina, and these two groups cooperated and had a fairly effective alliance. And then in 2019, a high-ranking member of the Native Syndicate killers was killed by two prominent members of the Indian Mafia, and this ended the truce between these two groups, and a significant wave of gang violence erupted between the two gangs. And then ever since, the Native Syndicate killers' influence has really seemed to diminish in Regina, whereas the Indian Mafia remain one of the most dominant gangs in the city of Regina. And now I'm going to move over to the city of Saskatoon, where the Indianposi, who I previously mentioned, as well as the Terror Squad, are the major gangs in that city. The Terror Squad is one of the newer Aboriginal street gangs in Canada, and they are identified by the colors black and white, in particular a paisley black bandana. They are also identified by the numbers 19 and 20 together. The Terror Squad was founded in Saskatoon in the 2000s by a man named Darren Craig Harper, and they first came on police radar in Saskatoon around 2006. And while they're based in Saskatoon, they're also heavily established in cities like Prince Albert and North Battleford. And of course, they're involved in everything you might expect: prostitution, car theft, extortion, robberies. And in my opinion, the Terror Squad is definitely one of the more wild and brazen Aboriginal street gangs in the Canadian Prairies. The Terror Squad has many enemies, but in particular, their strongest rival is the Saskatchewan Warriors, who are mostly based out of Regina. And the city of Saskatoon also has a bunch of other gangs. You had the Southside Queens that emerged around 2005, and then the Southside Kings that started up in the 2010s. Another Saskatoon gang called the Hustle Crew emerged around 2015, and then the Westside Outlaws really gained prominence around 2019. And then throughout the province, you also have a bunch of other smaller gangs such as Red Alert, the Crazy Cree, the Mixed Blood, Westside Soldiers, the Crips, the Junior Mixed Blood, the Tribal Brothers, the Indian Mafia Crips, and the North Central Rough Riders. These are all a bunch of minor gangs that you'll find throughout the province. And of course, gang activity is spread throughout the province of Saskatchewan. Crime doesn't really have any borders, but in particular, Regina's North Central neighborhood is a real hotspot for gang activity. I've personally spent a ton of time in this neighborhood, and it's definitely very sketchy, and you have to be very careful when you're walking around. You have cities like Prince Albert and the Battlefords, which are known to be real hotspots of criminal activity within Saskatchewan, and those cities in particular have really high crime rates. And that's pretty much my overview on the gang situation in Saskatchewan. The Hells Angels are definitely the most dominant criminal organization in Canada, but when it comes to the Canadian Prairies, you just have a ton of Aboriginal street gangs that are active in almost every city and town. I hope you found that interesting and informative, and if you'd like to watch more of my content in general, please consider subscribing to my channel. I upload at least one new video per week. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Strange North channel.